So finally, after so long, I guess the last update of the 16-inch MacBook Pro was on 2019. Yes, after 2 freaking years, they have finally decided to update their lineup. So hello guys, welcome back to another video of mine. And a couple of days back, I did a poll on my YouTube community, so please subscribe to my channel. Yeah, the poll was about that, do you want my honest critical analysis on the new MacBook launches? And 64% of you guys have said that yes, and 36% of you guys have said nah. And for the rest 64%, here is my analysis on the new launched MacBook Pros, for which I've been waiting for so long. So let's start with the processor. Yes, there are two specific processors, that's the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, that no one really thought of. Nevertheless, the M1 Pro houses a 10-core CPU. Yes, it's a 10-core CPU, and out of those 10 cores, 8 are high performance cores and 2 of them are high efficiency cores. Yes, and for the M1 Max, it's the same configuration, just that the GPU configuration is different. Yes, I will talk about the GPU on the M1 Pro and the M1 Max a little bit later, because I did a lot of analysis on those, and I mean a lot. Now, as we all know that when Apple launched their first M1 chip with the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro, it really shook the competition, simply because that M1 was so much more powerful compared to its competition with such low power consumption. Yes, on single core performance, it was trading blows with the likes of 5800H and higher Core i7 processors. But yes, obviously on the multi-core side, it was a little bit slower and couldn't really beat the competition. So, and my goodness, finally we're having the M1 Pro and the M1 Max, and the doubt that the M1 Max and the M1 Pro are 70% more powerful than the M1 chip. And I know that Apple comparisons are a bit shaky because they don't really say 70% of what, single core, multi-core, what sort of testing they're doing, but I can guarantee that this chip is going to be a beast. Now finally, coming to the most important section of this video, on which I've done really in-depth analysis, would be the GPU. Yes, the M1 powered MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro were really good contenders, but their GPU was not really that much powerful, but really couldn't compete with high-end discrete graphics from the likes of Nvidia and AMD. But finally, things are gonna change a lot. Now with the M1 Pro, we are getting up to a 16-core GPU, and with the M1 Max, we are getting up to a 32-core GPU. Apple claims that the 16-core GPU on the M1 Pro are 2 times faster than the ones on the M1, and the 32-core GPU on the M1 Max is 4 times faster than M1. Now what those numbers really mean, I would come to it very soon. Now let's talk about certain things that are really important that we should be aware of. These laptops are really meant for high-end professionals who are editors, video editors, content creators, people who are a lot into 3D work, game development, and all those really heavy stuff, right? Music production and other stuff. So yes, this is not meant for gamers and students like us, but let's get a little bit in-depth onto it. Okay, now something very special that the M1 Pro chip is having ProRes encode and decode engines. I don't think any Windows or any Intel-based laptops are having any dedicated ProRes encoder and decoder engines, mostly for video editors who are using ProRes footages, 4K, 6K, 8K. The performance is going to be really butter for you, because even on the high-end Intel-based Mac Pros, you have to use those very expensive afterburner cards to get that sort of performance when you're using ProRes footage. Yes, so on the M1 Pro alone, you can edit multiple streams of 4K and 8K ProRes videos, which is like totally insane. Yes, also one more thing, with the M1 Pro chip, you can get up to 32 GB of unified memory, which are really fast memory, and also the memory bandwidth is 200 gigabit per second, which is awesome. Now moving on to the most juiciest part will be the M1 Max, because God forbid, these are gonna kill a lot of competition. First, starting with that, you can have finally 64 GB of unified memory with this. I will tell you a little bit later on that what this 64 GB of unified memory really means for creators and other stuff, but let's talk about the M1 Max. Yes, the M1 Max is having a 32 core GPU, and in this one, you're not just having one ProRes engine, but 2 ProRes encode and decode engines, and you can even edit ProRes RAW in this one. Now coming to the performance, Apple has finally showed some, like real contenders, and they're comparing the Core i9 in the MacBook Pro 16-inch with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max at the 16-inch, and you can see that it is 2 times faster, which is really a lot faster because it's a Core i9 chip, and you can understand how much heat it produces, to be honest. And talking about the graphics on the 16-inch, and you can see even the previous highest end 5600M graphics chip, which would have cost I guess around $4,000 to $5,000 plus, is easily beat by M1 Pro and M1 Max, from up to 2.5x faster to 4x faster. And with the M1 Max chip, you can edit up to 30 streams of 4K ProRes 422 footage and 7 streams of 8K 422 ProRes footage, which is insane, because I know a lot of even $20,000 Mac Pro can't even edit those footage without the afterburner card. So let's talk about something very interesting that Apple showed us, would be some performance figures. Yes, they show it every year, but for the first time we are having some references. As you can see from their live event, I took those those screenshots, and it says that it is comparing this 8-core PC chip is basically an MSI GP66 Leopard. So I have done some analysis on that one too, and let's see what did I find. So basically this line represents the MSI GP66 Leopard, which is having a Core i7-11800H. Oh my god, that's a really powerful chip, and we are having some real competition from Apple this time. It is an Core i7-11800 chip, which is quite equivalent to 5800H. In certain cases, it beats the 5800H, and certain cases, it performs better than the 1100H. But we are not talking about Core i7 this time. Yes, we are talking about the M1 Pro and the M1X. As you can see that the CPU performance versus power graph is given. As you can see that the M1 Pro and the M1 Max performs 1.7 times more than the Core i7-11800H at 30 watts. Yes, obviously, it performs a little bit lesser at its full power, but you can see I guess it's still around 1.5 times more, and it's running at 30 watts, whereas the Core i7-11800H is again running at 63 watts of power. We don't really know what they're comparing, what are the metrics, what are the benchmark tests that they're really doing, so we should be waiting for the third-party reviews. And I'm also going to do the same thing. So the next comparison that they showed us for the GPU performance versus power for the M1 Pro chip, that's a 16-core GPU being compared. As you can see, they have again told us which laptop they have finally compared to, which is, I guess, a good thing because Apple is really trading blows this time. That's why they're pretty confident about these figures. So let's see what they have to say. So as you can see, there are a lot of things to talk about here right now, and we are talking about the M1 Pro chip, not the Max chip. I will be coming to the Max chip also. A lot of things. First, that they have compared it with the Lenovo Legion 5. Yes, Lenovo Legion 5. And the model that they've compared with is the Ryzen 7 5800H 8-core 16 threads processor with an RTX 3050 Ti that is running at 95 watts. As you can see from this line that the performance is almost the similar, and I've also mentioned it here that M1 Pro 16-core GPU is almost equivalent to an RTX 3050 Ti. Yes, it would have been a little bit better if we could have got performance more like 3060, but it's totally fine, right? Because it's using 70% less power. So let's talk about the next graph that they showed us for the M1 Max. Yes, we are talking about the M1 Max, and let's see what we have here. Right. So first of all, they have compared it with the Razer Blade 15 Advanced that is having a Core i9-11900H, and the most interesting thing, it is having a 16GB RTX 3080, and you can see that it's performing more than that. And you can see that Razer Blade 15 Advanced is running at 105 watts of power. That simply means that it is using a lot more power, generating a lot more heat, a lot more fan noise, but the GPU on the M1 Max is only running at roughly about 57 watts. And you can see that the M1 Max 32-core GPU performs more, 35% more than the 105 watt RTX 3080, 105 watts RTX 3080. So yes, finally we are in the range of 3080, and my goodness, it performs even better than the RTX 3080, but that's not the entire story. So the next graph that they showed us was a little bit more higher end PC laptop, and as you can see, that's the MSI GE76 Radar. So let's see. Yep, they've compared it with the MSI GE76 Radar that is having Core i9-11980HK at a 16GB RTX 3080 running at 165 watts. Oh my god, that's just so much of power. It uses 100 watt of less power, and yes, now finally it's not as powerful as this GPU because it's running at so much higher power. M1 Max 32-core GPU performs 35% less than the RTX 3080. So what does this mean? That the M1 Pro is on the territory of 3050 Ti and the M1 Max is on the territory of 3080. Oh my goodness, that's some real competition from Apple. Now let's talk about a very important section, that would be the display on the 14-inch and the 16-inch newly launched MacBook Pro. Yes, now the bezel's a lot more thinner, and it's 24% thinner on the 16-inch and even 60% thinner on the top end. And yes, the notch is a really debatable topic. Some people would like the notch and would say, yeah, we are having a lot more real estate because the top taskbar is using that space, and practically you're getting rest of the screen for your workspace. But again, to me, it looks a little bit uglier side. I wouldn't have mind because I mean, it's really already quite sleek at this point, and yes, I guess on dark mode it would look a little bit nicer. Now talking about the resolution, yes, it is having a 3456 by 2234, and that's almost like 4K display. Not really 4K, but almost 4K. That's having, I guess, more than 200 ppi. And talking about the 14-inch display, it is having a resolution of 3024 by 1964, which are really high resolution display. Oh my god. So another thing that Apple did this time was inclusion of ProMotion on their laptop screens, which simply means that they're adding adaptive refresh rate, a 4K display up to 120 Hz. What else can we expect? My goodness. And as you can see that it can go as low as 24 Hz. And not just that, it is also having a mini LED display. The same technology that they have used on their Pro XDR display. My goodness. And to be honest, I have already used this ProMotion XDR mini LED display on my 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and I just can't go back, honestly. It's so awesome. Talking about the brightness, my goodness, it is having 1000 nits of sustained brightness, and even the 13-inch MacBook Pro could only go up to 500 nits, and 500 nits was already pretty much bright. So this definitely technically also supports HDR, and you can also see that it can go up to 1600 nits of peak brightness. And yes, I can undoubtedly say that this is going to be one of the very best monitor displays on a laptop. Now let's talk about the ports on this laptop really quick. So finally, the most important ports are back. We are having an HDMI port, Thunderbolt 4 port, and SD card slot. I mean, every creator I know uses an SD card slot, so that's a very welcoming change. And on the other side, they're having two Thunderbolt USB Type-C port and MagSafe port. Yes, the MagSafe charging port is back again, and it is having an audio input and output jack with a high quality DAC. Talking about the keyboard, finally the touch bar is gone, which a lot of people didn't really like and didn't really serve that sort of functionality. And thank God the butterfly keyboards are again back, and you can see that the keyboard dick is anodized in black for better contrast, which I really like. And the function keys are back, which is, to be honest, more functional. Now talking about the speakers, we already know that MacBooks are pretty much the industry leaders in the speaker quality, and they are telling that they have again improved on this ones with about 80% more bass than the previous edition. I just can't wait to listen to these speakers. And yes, they finally added 6 array studio speakers on the 14-inch Model 2s. Talking about the webcam, it is having a 1080p face cam HD camera, and the aperture of f2.0 is a pretty bright aperture, and I can clearly say that these are gonna be one of the very best webcam on a laptop. As you guys already know that webcams on Windows laptops are like total crap. So now talking about the battery life of this laptop, the 14-inch one will be having 17 hours of video playback, which is really good, but it's I guess 1 hour less than the M1 powered MacBook, simply because these chips are very much more powerful than the M1. So, and also the display is much more powerful and power hungry. So yes, 1 hour little less. But talking about the 16-inch one, it is having 21 hours of video playback. Oh my goodness, this is going to be one of the very best laptops having the very best battery life. And you guys know that Windows laptops have a very bad tendency of performing significantly worse when they're working on battery, but you know that MacBooks don't have that tendency, and they give almost similar performance on their battery too. So yes, and so finally, yes, I guess we will be able to even edit on battery. Something that's really new with this MacBooks are the power of fast charging. And yes, Apple claims that we can charge up to 50% in 30 minutes, but there's a catch. They are shipping the 67-watt charger with a very base variant of 14-inch. You need to pay $20 extra to get the 97-watt charger, but the 16-inch ones ship with 140 watts of power. Yes, Apple have never crossed the 100-watt barrier before, yes, but this time Apple is going full performance. Just according to me, I guess that the 14-inch ones are having a little bit of throttling issues, not really that much, but because obviously they are being shipped with 97-watt charger, because the 16-inch ones are shipped with 140 watts of power. But I don't know, we have to wait for it. Now talking about the SSDs, we are having 7.4 gigabyte per second. That's crazy speeds of SSD, and this will be really helpful when you're out of RAM usage and we are caching from our SSDs. So we will be coming to pricing shortly, and if you guys want, I will make a very separate video on the pricing because there are too many combinations to talk about in just single video. Right now I will be talking about a video editor's perspective. Yes, you guys have been waiting so long for this section. I am a video editor, I am a motion designer, and I'm a little bit of designer too. So who is this laptop meant for? Is this laptop meant for college students, people getting into engineering, civil engineers, and other people? I would say no, simply because there's just too much of power and it's just too expensive for those people. I guess the vanilla M1 MacBook Air is still one of the very best bang for buck laptop for those people who are just getting into college engineering and want to do some basic editing, like a lot of coding and other stuff. For them, for example, if you're just like really casual about video editing and other stuff, you don't really need this one unless you're like a proper freelancer or you're working on big gigs, 3D rendering going on, a lot of polygons and other stuff, working on Cinema 4D, working on all those heavy applications. Yes, then it might be worth it for you. Is it worth it for me? Definitely, because M1 MacBook Air is not really that really powerful for my sort of work that I do. And yes, I think I will be getting this one instead of any Windows laptop. And also something I really forgot to tell about that, this concept of the unified memory, right? So if I get the 64GB RAM, and this RAM is not just for the CPU, but also the GPU. Yes, the GPU shares the memory from the 64GB, so you can virtually get 64GB of video memory on a laptop. There are no laptops that are having 64GB of video memory. You will say, do you really need that amount of video memory? I can say that yes, certain type of workflow might need heavy polygons and heavy 3D stuff might need that. Yes, I am already maxing out my 6GB of GTX 1060 on my laptop, So yes, that will be beneficial for me. And why again for video creators? This is going to be one of the very best laptop displays period, right? Because you can do HDR video editing on a laptop. Even an HDR monitor costs like really a lot, I guess 50,000-60,000 to be honest, and you can do it on a laptop itself. And one more thing would be that the M1 MacBook Air could only connect to I guess one 4K monitor. I already use the monitor right now, and I have one more monitor on my hostel, so yes, that thing matters to me definitely. And finally, SD card slot. Oh my goodness, I just can't imagine even having a laptop without an SD card slot and other, HDMI slots and other stuff. Now let's talk about the pricing of these laptops, and boy, these laptops are so freaking expensive. And even in India, you can see that the 14-inch MacBook Pro, the base variant starts at 1,94,000, and even you don't get the proper 10-core CPU and the 16-core GPU. This is a binned version, and you get an 8-core CPU and a 14-core GPU. Yes, these prices are really expensive, and you can see again you're getting the slower speed of power adapter, right? So I have to virtually spend around 2,40,000 for getting the 14-inch MacBook Pro. And according to my calculations, the 14-inch MacBook Pro really doesn't make a lot of sense, because as you can see, the 13-inch MacBook Pro costs around 1,23,000, I guess, which is plenty much powerful enough for most of us, right? And this one starts at 1,94,000. I don't think you get that much of value out of the 14-inch, but yes, you get a lot of value out of the 16-inch one, according to my calculation, because you're already getting a 10-core CPU, a 16-core GPU, and a 16 GB of unified memory and 512 GB SSD, right? Bigger screen, bigger battery, and yes, the previous Core i9 MacBook Pro 16-inch also costs around 2,40,000. So yes, this price is totally justified. I guess it's more than justified, to be honest. And the best thing that you can even configure the 14-inch MacBook Pro with any chips, right? So what's the final verdict? Is the newly launched MacBooks overpriced? I guess 14-inch pricing really makes no sense to me. Yes, the 16-inch one is really worth it, to be honest. And for the right set of people who can actually, get the benefit of this extra performance and other stuff, I guess this one is worth it. And to be honest, let's compare with the comparison that they did, right? And even on their benchmarks, they've compared it with Razer Blade 15, which costs around $3,400, and this one costs around $3,500. So definitely it's pretty much in line with the competition. And again, yes, this laptop is not meant for gamers. And one more comparison that we can't ignore would be this one, the XPS 17, that is having an 11800H and a meager 3060 graphics card, and that's cost around 2,70,000. My goodness. And for 2,60,000, first you get a much better built laptop, a better display, a better processor, obviously a better graphics card, almost a similar graphics card. Why similar? Because this is having a 3060, but this 3060 is not as powerful. I guess it's running at 60 watts. So yep, I guess it's pretty much in line with the competition. The pricing on the 16-inch one is totally justifiable. So what are your thoughts on this video? If you have any doubts, let me know in the comment section below. I know this video has been pretty long at this point, but there's so much that Apple improved in this version that I had to talk about. Let's see you in the next video.